Hey everybody, I'm Imani, your astrological karmic life coach, and today I'm talking all about Jupiter entering Cancer on the 1st of June 2026. So the theme is the homecoming you didn't know that you needed, right? So maybe for some of you, you have been in your head, right? Overthinking, and now with Jupiter going into Cancer, we're being dropped into our heart space, our emotional space, right? And honestly, you know, this landing may bruise a bit for some of you, especially if you're more intellectual, right? So Jupiter has been, spent the last year bouncing between Gemini and Cancer, retrograding back through the mental realm, the third house space of Gemini, like someone who keeps leaving a party, then coming back for their cult. That's done now. On June the 1st, Jupiter has crossed into Cancer for real, no more rehearsals, and it's really good because Jupiter is at home in Cancer, right? It's exalted here, it's cool here, it's in a good place for Jupiter to be. So there's no more previews, no more intellectual distance between you and your feelings. This isn't Jupiter dipping a toe in Cancer, this is Jupiter diving into the deep end of the emotional pool, and it's taking you with it. The planet of expansion, of growth, is entering its sign of exaltation. It's good here, as I said, it's chilling, it's happy, the place where it operates as, at its absolute most powerful. And Pluto is also retrograde in Capricorn, and that's quietly dismantling your relationship with power from the inside out as well. So yeah, I'm going to explain more about what all that means, but first I'm gonna go into Jupiter. So Jupiter's been in Gemini, right? It goes into Cancer on the 1st of June at 9:20 British summer time till the 31st of October, when it moves into Leo, and then Jupiter's going retrograde in December, the 13th of December actually, while it's still in Leo, and of course it's going to go back into Cancer at some point, but today we're talking about it moving into Cancer, right? So as I said, it's going to happen at 9:20 British summer time, which is 1:20 p.m. PDT time, 2:20 p.m. Mountain time, 3:20 p.m. Central time, 4:20 p.m. Eastern time, 10:20 p.m. Central European time, 1:50 a.m. on the 2nd of June IST Indian time, and 6:20 a.m. on the 2nd of June Australian Eastern time, right? So of course, when Jupiter goes into a sign, or any planet goes into a sign, when it's not retrograde, it always goes into the first degree of that sign, right? So Jupiter enters Cancer in the first degree Sabian symbol that has the symbology of a sailor ready to hoist up a new flag to replace the old one, and it rules the 6th rib in our human body, and I'm going to explain what all that means. But Cancer rules the stomach and the chest, right? So it's exalted, it's good here at maximum strength, and it's in the Parnavusu, that Sakra, which is ruled by Aditi, the mother of the gods, and this is the infinite mother and the primordial goddess, right? And the key aspects that Jupiter is making, while it's making a conjunction to Venus, and this is 7:49 applying, a quintal from Mars at 1:50 applying, and it's making a square to Chiron at 5 degrees applying. And I'm going to go into the layers of what all this means. This is just a summary version for all of you that like it in 5 to 10 minutes or so. So the T-squares, there's 2 of them, between the Moon in Sagittarius, Neptune in Pisces, and Mercury in Gemini, and Saturn in Pisces, Venus in Gemini as well, and then we've got the midhaven in Virgo and then we've got Pluto retrograde at the 12th degree of Capricorn, and it went retrograde on the 6th of May. And as I said, Jupiter is going retrograde on the 13th of December at the 2nd degree of Leo, and I'm going to explain what all of that means while I'm mentioning the retrogrades of Pluto and the others that I'm going to mention, right? So we've named what's happening: Jupiter, the planet of growth, expansion and growth and meaning taking, is finally committing to Cancer for a bit after months of retrograde back and forth between your head and your heart, Gemini and Cancer. So Jupiter in Cancer is exalted. It's a good placement, right? It means it's operating at its peak power and generosity and peak capacity to expand and grow our emotional worlds, right? So as it's doing that, Pluto's in Capricorn, stripping back our public mass and power structures from the inside out, and this combination is asking something profound, deep and next level of you. So it's asking whether you can grow through feeling rather than thinking, whether you can expand and grow through vulnerability rather than achievement, and whether the foundations, your daily habits, and thoughts that you have actually built hold the weight of who you're becoming. And I'm going to walk you through exactly what this means for your emotions, for your relationships, your career, your body and the parts of yourself you've been protecting since childhood. So ultimately, here's what you really need to know about Jupiter in Cancer, right? So the upside is this is the most emotionally abundant transit in 12 years, brilliant for healing family wounds, deepening emotional, intimate connections and growing your sense of home, internal and external, and sense of belonging, reconnecting with your intuition and that inner child, right, and your emotions, and building foundations, daily habits that will actually take care of you, nourish you and balance you. And we have a chance for our emotional intelligence to become our superpower, but the challenge is old family patterns can come to the surface, not to destroy you but to be healed. You might overgive or overmother or overprotect, and boundaries around caretaking need attention. And Pluto retrograde adds the undercurrent of power dynamics that are being exposed. Your comfort zone you have built might not survive this transit, and that's the point. The best use of this energy is to invest in your emotional habits and foundations, have therapy, commit to personal development regimen and routine, have family conversations that you've been putting off, intimate conversations with lovers or friends or whatever, business partners, making improvements to your external, your physical home and your inner home by learning to understand or continue to understand your emotional, psychological and spiritual trauma, and bring more balance into your inner world, being creative, especially doing creative projects that connect you to your sense of home, your heritage, and just let yourself feel without trying to fix every emotion that comes up, building security from the inside out, not the outside in. So the energetic frequency, what this energy will actually feel like. So take a journey with me here. Imagine you've been living in an airport for a year. Bright lights, constant noise, information everywhere, moving fast, thinking faster. That was Jupiter in Gemini. Stimulating but exhausting, may have led to burnout with all the rapid thoughts. Expansive, allowing you to grow but scattered, not really focusing your energy anywhere. Now imagine walking out of that airport into a garden at dusk, just before when it gets dark, right? And the air is warm, the ground is soft, something smells like your grandmother's or anyone else that you care for, and like their food kitchen, and it smells so good you can breathe it all in. And that's the energetic shift of Jupiter entering Cancer. Cancer is a cardinal water sign. It initiates, it starts through feeling. It's the sign of the mother, the feminine energy, the home, the womb, the place where you first learn whether the world was safe or not, right? And Jupiter in Cancer, it's exalted here. Jupiter is at its absolute best here, as I said. It's the capacity to grow, to nourish, to create abundance, to protect and provide. All of this is intensified to the maximum value when it's here, right? So, emotional generosity can flow more easier. You can feel more connected to your intuition, your body, your family, your roots. As I said, there can be more of a natural desire to create safety, not just for yourself, but for the people around you. Your empathy for yourself and others can become deeper. You can have creativity that is tied to feeling, and this intensifies, and home becomes like a sacred space rather than just somewhere you sleep and eat and all of that. The shadow expression is that over protection can become control, nurturing can become smothering and a prison, right? Emotional growth without boundaries become emotional flooding. The desire for safety can tip into fear of change and clinging to your comfort zone and what's familiar, even when it's killing you. So, as I said earlier, Jupiter moving through Cancer carries the energy of Purnavusu Natsakra, the return of the light, right? And I'm going to talk a bit more about the Vedic layer in a while, but Purnavusu spans the 20th degree of Gemini to 3.20 degree of Cancer, and so it actually crosses the boundary between Gemini and Cancer, Mercury and the Moon, and the ruling planet of this Natsakra is Jupiter. So it's where it's at, right? It's really good here, it's happy here. And the deity, as I said, is Aditi, the infinite cosmic mother and the mother of the gods, right? Aditi's energy isn't about storms and destruction, but about wholeness, protection and renewal. Purnavusu is the light that returns after difficulty, the sense of finding your center again after being scattered, or feeling held by something larger than your struggles. So when Jupiter carries Purnavusu's energy into Cancer, your emotional growth isn't necessarily dramatic or violent. It's more like a gentle but powerful recentering. You remember who you are, you reclaim hope, you realize that what you thought was the ending was actually the beginning of restoration, of the reset, right? Of your energy coming back to you. And Purnavusu says the loss is followed by replenishment. The darkness is followed by the return of the light. Think of it like a soft dawn after a long night. The world is still the same, but everything feels different because the light has come back. Seeds that have been dormant for years suddenly germinate. It's not comfortable, but it's alive. And underneath all of this, Pluto sits retrograde in Capricorn in the background, like the bass note in a song you can't quite hear but feel in your chest, right? We'll come back to Pluto and why I'm mentioning it and contrasting it with Jupiter in Cancer in a bit, but know this right now: whilst Jupiter is expanding and growing your emotional world, Pluto is quietly dismantling the power structures that keep your emotions managed and tells you that you can't sow them, or you have to people please and can't do this or that. So the combination is very potent for you to liberate yourself, as Pluto is helping you tear down those emotional walls, right? So now I'm going to talk about guidance for all the 12 sun, moon and rising signs, right? So if you just know your sun sign, read for that, but if you know your moon and rising, read the interpretations for that as well. So for Aries, your family foundations are growing whilst your childhood patterns surface for healing. Your home becomes your power base, but only if you're willing to let emotional honesty replace the warrior mask you've been wearing since maybe age 7. The mother wound opens finally, and property investments or domestic changes are favoured during this transit for you. And your roots, your heritage is calling you home, demanding you nurture yourself as fiercely as you charge into battle for everyone else. And remember, security doesn't come from never needing anyone, it comes through vulnerability. Let yourself be held for once, So for Taurus, creative expression can deepen as your emotional generosity overflows, but this isn't about achieving, it's about feeling. Your heart becomes the artist now, and romance ties you directly to emotional safety rather than material security. Children, creativity and pleasure can grow and expand during this transit, but joy, happiness requires letting yourself need love without performing stability first. Your inner child wants to play with actual depth, not just, surface level comfort right now, and expansion growth of Jupiter asks you, can you let yourself want what you want without justifying why you deserve it, you know? Gemini, your work-life balance resets as your body starts saying what your mind won't admit. Daily routines need emotional nourishment, not just productivity and intellectual overthinking, you know, and service must become soul work rather than, you know, logical intellectual performance. So health ties directly to honesty, especially emotional honesty for you, and the fatigue you're ignoring is a data that you need to take heed of, listen to, right? Not a weakness. So wellness routines can really change during this transit for you, Gemini. Your work must feed your heart, not drain it, whilst you stay mentally stimulated enough to avoid feeling. Listen to what your body knows before your clever mind talks you out of it. Cancer, you know, this is your transit. Expansion and growth happens through feeling everything you have been managing, and, you know, Cancer is exalted in Jupiter, says come home to yourself completely. Emotional abundance overflows, but you're terrified of it because you've spent decades being the one who holds everyone else while staying empty yourself. So you're allowed to need. The mother wound heals through mothering yourself first, not through perfectly mothering everyone else until you earn their care and people please it out of them, right? So personal change, reinvention is grounded in emotional truth, authentic change, emotional expression. That is, so, you know, Jupiter in Cancer reminds you that you're becoming who you always were before you learned that having needs were a burden, you know. Leo, spiritual foundations, daily habits can deepen as essential healing intensifies and the unseen world expand and grows beyond performance spiritually. Solitude becomes sacred rather than lonely, but only if you stop treating rest as punishment for not being productive enough. Dreams can become more vivid, your subconscious can be flooded, your inner world demands attention that you really usually reserve for your audience. You give yourself that attention now. Remember that retreat, you know, spending time alone isn't failure, it's necessary. Inner work rewards outer success, but you have to actually do it privately before, you know, broadcasting it and telling the world about your changes that you're making and the transformation you're going through. Live it yourself. Remember, rest isn't a weakness, it stops you from burning out. It's wisdom, you know, you've been performing around rather than practicing, right? So it's time to integrate and practice what you've been performing. Virgo, your friendships can deepen or dissolve and based on the emotional honesty that can come out right now, rather than, you know, said function and jobs or tasks and mutual usefulness. Emotional honesty will make you aware of what is genuine in your relationships and friendships right now, so your community can grow, but your tribe wants the real you. Messy, imperfect, needy, you know, maybe wanting not the version who fixes everyone's problems whilst having none of your own. Or you may have to find new social circles that accept that side of you, because sometimes people expect you to be just the strong one. So your networks and social circles can change entirely, and belonging happens through vulnerability and, you know, working, being collaborative with others, and teamwork in projects can really grow when you stop trying to be indispensable and be real. Chosen family can form and change during this transit, but only if you let people see you're not actually fine all of the time. So start being useful, start being human. So for Libra, your career is really tied to your emotional fulfillment, happiness, and your public image finally can reflect your private truth rather than performed harmony. So professional changes can happen for you, but leadership must come through care and authenticity, not through keeping everyone comfortable while you collapse internally. You know, what nourishes others has to nourish you first. That's not selfish, that's sustainable in the long term. Your reputation can change, you know. Your work must feed your soul, and success can get redefined through emotional honesty instead of external validation. So authority through being authentic, start mediating everyone else's conflicts and start having your own boundaries. So Scorpio, your philosophy can grow through feeling as your spiritual beliefs grow and evolve beyond intellectual understanding, and you start embodying the truth, living your truth. Travel becomes an emotional pilgrimage, a vocation rather than an escape from the intensity you won't possess at home, so really get into those emotions and see it, reverence in it, see it as a sacred sacrament, a privilege to have emotions, rather than escaping from your intensity. Learn to manage and process it and know when to use it and not. Higher education, publishing and spiritual exploration, travel, expanding, grow, can really broaden your worldview right now, and your meaning making, how you make sense of the world, can deepen, but only when your truth stops living solely in your head. Learning happens through being vulnerable, the kind that terrifies you because it means being seen before you're in complete control of the narrative, right? So you won't be able to wear the mask. This energy of Jupiter in Cancer for you, Scorpio, wants you to live and be your truth and not be scared of being vulnerable and not seeing it as a weakness. And wisdom can come through emotional depth and letting yourself be taught by your feelings for once rather than being intensified by them, right? So for Sagittarius, shared resources, inheritance and emotional intimacy deepen as transformation demands emotional honesty that you usually philosophize around. Other people's money, energy and vulnerability become your territory, but true intimacy requires feeling everything, not just the expansive, optimistic parts of yourself. Trust issues can come up for healing, financial partnerships, sexuality and psychological depth can grow. During this transit, the work is merging without losing yourself, working with others, combining with others, uniting, and without losing your sense of self, which means actually letting someone else see you when you're not performing wisdom or running towards the next horizon, the next big thing. Stay, feel, then decide. Capricorn, partnerships can intensify as one-on-one relationships demand emotional honesty rather than practical competence. Marriage, business partnerships and therapy all deepen, but commitment happens through vulnerability, not through being the responsible one who holds the structure whilst everyone else gets to fall apart. Your significant other can mirror your emotional work right back at you. Love can become, an emotional kind of excavation, you digging up and reflecting back who you are to you, or you can finally see your partner for who they are and or those who you are in deep relationships with, and what you see may not be something you like, so you may decide to let those relationships go. So relationships can expand and grow when you choose partners, friends, people who can actually hold your depth and who you actually are, instead of ones who need you to be strong or people please or do anything else other than be yourself, so they can, stay weak, you the strong one, they can be the one that depends on you and you can't, show any weakness to them. Relationships will be balanced, So remember, emotional safety is their foundation, not an optional extra in relationships, it's got to be a two-way street, Aquarius, daily life changes as health and work routines demand emotional nourishment instead of detached efficiency. Your body can speak louder during this transit. Wellness is tied to feeling, not thinking your way through exhaustion. Service must become self-care rather than sacrifice, dressed as a humanitarian concern. You looking after others' needs but not looking after your own. It has to be balanced, and put your own life mass on first and all of that, Productivity has to serve emotional truth, not override it with intellectual superiority. Work-life balance has to reset entirely for you to be in balance, right? To avoid burnout, you must look after the needs of your mind, body and soul, higher consciousness. So you may have routine changes around your emotional needs that you have been, spiritually or philosophically bypassing. So it's time to get real and be efficient through feeling, not by hiding feelings to try and be efficient, right? Get out of your head and into your actual human lived experience, right? Get practical about your needs and don't feel wrong for having needs. Pisces, romance, creativity, children and pleasure can grow and expand as joy can come through emotional depth rather than, escapist fantasy. Your heart becomes the portal, the doorway, but creative expression, is tied to feelings, and the feelings you usually dissolve and let go and ignore into universal ones, maybe to avoid, like, oh, I have to be kind, I have to do this. Yes, they hurt me, but, spirituality teaches us forgiveness. Yes, it does, but it also teaches us to love ourselves and protect ourselves in the right ways. So remember that playfulness requires emotional safety. The grounded kind, not the disassociative kind where you forget your needs and pretend you're not in pain. Love life can deepen when you are true about your needs. Creative projects can flourish and grow. Your inner child wants to feel specific human emotions, not just merge with the collective consciousness. Let yourself want what you actually want, not what sounds spiritually evolved. Choose lived, embodied experience, presence over transcendent escape, So now I'm going to go into more depth about the Vedic layer, right, and meanings. So when Jupiter enters Cancer, it's, in the first degree, so this is instability, new territory, unfamiliar ground, it's in Sandhi, sign junction, and it's also in Virgo Tamar, so Jupiter in Cancer VC, its soul sign in Cancer, right, and then that's also which rules Cancer, right, and it's in the Parnavusu, part of 4, Natsakra, soul nourishment, auspicious, good support, protective blessing by being here. So it's in its exaltation zone, being in Cancer, right? It's strong in its dignity and has maximum strength. And it's also because it's in the 0 to 6 degrees of Cancer in the even sign. It's in a death state, Muratuyu, which is Ladi Avastra. So it's near 0 vitality, even though it's exalted. It's a paradox of sorts, right? It's paradoxical weaknesses because it's within exaltation, because it's in the sign it loves, Jupiter, where it's high, right? So it's a period of high potential but slow initial manifestation. So the blessings of Jupiter in Cancer may be slow to manifest. On the mundane, the simplest level, Cancer lives in the 4th house that's ruled by the moon, and the moon rules Cancer. So this is the home, emotional foundation, roots and the motherland, our heritage, and end of life care and all of that, right? So as I said, the paradox has survived when Jupiter stations into Cancer at maximum dignity in the sign of its greatest strength. But the degree level, the vitality, because it's near 0, the death, as I said earlier, the Baladi Avastra, the Miratuyu death state, right? So were being handed the master key to the kingdom while still learning to walk. Exaltation says expand, grow. Miratuyu says not yet, both are true. The Sandhi, the 0 to 1 degree entry zone, compounds this, adds to this, drives this home, Jupiter has crossed the Gemini Cancer boundary threshold, the unfamiliar waters, so far as it's just come out of Gemini, right, even though it's been retrograding in Cancer, but now it's settled here, right, so it's unfamiliar emotional waters after 5 months of Gemini's mental gymnastics. The guru doesn't know this landscape yet. Wisdom hasn't found its footing in the feeling quite, even though it's dipped its toes into Cancer through the retrograde period, right? But the soul rescue of the Pushkara, the soul nourishment zone, and it's in Vargatama, Cancer in both Rishi and Navasa, right? Jupiter rules this Natsakra, and Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, so it's very happy here. So when the surface level of vitality fails, soul level alignment carries us through. So it's the paradox of it being at death here, only because it's in an even sign between 0 and 60. So the Matuyu Avasa means Jupiter's usual expansion growth through philosophy won't work, but Vagatama means Jupiter's essential nature, wisdom, protection, dharmic growth, karmic growth, operates at the soul frequency, your higher consciousness from within, bypassing the degree of weaknesses, right? And the Puskara as protection, even when you don't know how to move forward, you're being fed, right? By dreams, by visions, by thoughts, and the nourishment comes through Cancer's domain by looking after your internal and external home, looking after your emotional safety, and looking after your family and your, what family means to you, looking after yourself, your maternal self, your feminine energy, and it's bringing us that ancestral support, right? And remember, you're not building from strength, you're being held while strength rebuilds from within out. So the Panavusu Natsakra is the return home, and the deity of Panavusu is a deity, the cosmic mother, as they said. It's the Natsakra of the return after exile, after, being told, no, you can't come here, you're banished from here, sort of thing. It's restoration after loss, after ending, after Greece. And the Sakti, the power, is Vastuva Prapana, the power to gain wealth or substance again. This is recovery energy, not conquest energy. And Pada 4, the Cancer Navasa moon ruled, is the homecoming itself, the wanderer returning to the mother's house. The exile, the one that's been banished, finding sanctuary. And Jupiter exalted in Panavusu means wisdom returns through emotional grounding, by being open to your emotions, by building your emotional intelligence, by looking after yourself through healthy self-care. And philosophy, your belief systems, your values need to become embodied, lived in your family, your home, and your roots, your heritage, right? Whatever that means to you. Jupiter, known as Guru in Vedic astrology, right, stops teaching us in the abstract, and starts cooking meals and being practical, looking after gardens, building foundations, the right daily habits. And the Dharma, which is Jupiter's domain, what it rules, right, and nurture, which is Cancer's gift. So we're learning Dharma through nurture, looking after ourselves, repaying our karmic debt or healing our past, whatever you want to put it as, through looking after ourselves and healthy self-care. And the Sabian symbol, which is the sailor putting up a new flag, reminds us of this fact, right, that we're claiming new allegiance, the flag from a position of emotional truth. And the sailor represents the water element, which Cancer is a water sign, cardinal water sign, right? So what you're loyal to now must feed you, not just inspire you, but really help you grow on a mind, body and soul level, and help you, come into balance on the emotional level, looking after your emotional, sort of like intelligence and spiritual needs and psychological needs, right? So the collective wound, Cancer rules the 4th house, as I said, and Jupiter is assaulted here, and this confronts the collective emotional foundation, habits, our nations, our homelands, our mother wounds, our wounds with the feminine energy, and the ancestral and generational trauma. And right now we're going through a lot of trauma as I record this, right? There's lots of wars going on, and between June and October 2026 we can renegotiate what home means to us, what safety requires, because, right now we are feeling unsafe with all the craziness, what's going on, and we'll be thinking about what actually the feminine energy, what mothers deserve, what leaders deserve, literally and metaphorically. We'll be questioning, and there's a lot of tension across the world's nations about immigration, housing, family structures, maternal health care, and Jupiter expands and grows and blesses those, Cancer spaces and domains, but Panavusu says through restoration, not revolution, but through rest, by, taking time out to think. So think about, where have you been exiled from emotional safety? And for a lot of us, it's in our countries, we don't feel safe there, right? And Panavusu calls us back, wants us to reclaim that safety and think about where have our families fractured, broken down, and Jupiter in Cancer repairs through wisdom and feeling combined. So it's promising that, we can feel a bit more united in our world, So Jupiter transits Cancer in direct motion until the 31st of October, as I said. So this is, 5 months of us restoring, resetting our energy, and it wants us to practice, not to force expansion and growth, right? It wants us to grow from the depth level, right? To let the Vagatamara and Paskara feed you first on the soul energy level. Return to a place that held us before, so going back to our roots for some of us, or creating a new safe space because you never felt space for others, right? And even if this is just symbolically, call the, mother, ancestor, elder who knows your name. Maybe, so for some of you, it may be going back to a family member you've cut off, or, reconnecting with a nation, a religion, or a home that you left and now you're returning to it. Maybe cooking the family recipe, sleeping in the bed that remembers you. Some of you may actually go back to your childhood home, right? Letting the wisdom come through your body, through home, through the 6th rib, which is the body area the Sabian symbol rules, right? And letting our breath allow us to feel and to grow. And the new flag that we put up, it's the emotional truth as our dharma, as our reward, right? To live. And what feeds us right now is our path, so we have to be careful of where we put our words and our attention to right now, and stop sailing towards philosophies and belief systems that starve you and keep you in a comfort zone and keep you divisive and thinking you're better than others, but go into belief systems that actually feed you and balance you, right? So in terms of what to look at in your own natal chart, your moon sign, whether it's Cancer, Scorpio or Pisces, that will affect you more, this Jupiter going into Cancer. Or if your moon's in the 8th, 4th and 12th houses, also pay attention to your rising sign, as this determines which house Jupiter transits for you, and your natal chart transits as well. And especially if you have Jupiter in Cancer, Sagittarius or Pisces, or in the 9th, 12th or 4th houses, and whether any natal planet is in the 1 degree of any sign, this transit can affect you more. So now I'm just going to talk about where this energy shows up more in the different areas of your life. So in terms of your money, resources and security, Jupiter, as I said, is exalted in Cancer, so it's good for, creating new financial habits. It isn't about, flashy wealth showing off. It's the kind of money tied to emotional security. So maybe some of you will rent property, buy property, have conversations about your inheritance and family financial planning or individual life planning. Open up a savings account that can make you feel safe, or think about how you can budget more. Some of you may invest in home renovations, creating a space, a safe space that reflects who you actually are. So changing how your room looks, buying a new duvet, something like that. Some of you may actually relocate, as I said. Real estate moves are really favoured, and it's really good to create a space within you or in a physical home or room that reflects who you actually are rather than who you thought you should be. But watch out for emotional spending, because Cancer can make us all a bit moody in Jupiter, right? And we can just do a lot of comfort spending. And with Pluto retrograde in the 10th house in Capricorn, there's a tension between our professional power and domestic peace, so we can easily just spend money to try and create that internal peace or distract us from the lack of internal peace, right, and peace in the workplace. So the money question isn't just how much it is, what is the money actually being used for? If it's being used to create a safe space and to, practice healthy self-care, not self-destructive where you spend all your rent money in and you're like, oh, I'm going to be homeless at the end of the month, and try and address the issues, confront the issues that are making you feel like you need to emotionally overspend and all of that. So in terms of your career and public life, so in terms of, society and public life and career, people can be more focused on changing careers to more caring professions, focusing on community building or work that actually feeds your soul rather than just your bank account. Jupiter in Cancer asks, does your work nourish you, nurture you, keep you balanced, inspire you, or are you just surviving, And of course, we have to survive, we have to pay bills, I get all of that, but it's asking you to look at, long-term plans, maybe going back to schooling or anything else, applying for different jobs that can make you feel more happy in your career. And Pluto in Capricorn adds the layer of us being more focused on our public image, our career goals, and the way we present ourselves to the world. So all of this is being internally reviewed with Pluto being in Capricorn, the power dynamics at work that we've accepted, and they are about to become unbearable. If you haven't checked out my audio on Pluto retrograde, check it out. But in terms of, Jupiter in Cancer, it can make us feel really pent up, like we really need to make an emotional change to get our emotional life in balance, and our work and career can become unbearable because we've changed, and we may want to refocus our career to more to be focused on maybe healthcare, food, education, property, childcare, or supporting the community. Some of you may want to take up activism roles in community and all of that. So in terms of your inner world, this is where the real work happens. As I said, Jupiter in Cancer doesn't just grow your external world, it grows your internal one. Your emotional capacity grows, your sensitivity can deepen. The things you've been avoiding feeling, they can come to the surface, not to punish you, but to finally be properly felt by you. So think of it like the scene in Good Will Hunting, if you haven't seen it. It's a film where Robin Williams keeps saying it's not your fault until the character that Matt Damon breaks and says, it's not my fault, and acknowledges it. We've all been through some crap on this earth, right? And even if we wish we could have done things differently, ultimately at the time we're actually doing what we are absolutely capable of doing. Even when we think, yeah, I've got the knowledge, I know better, but if you actually knew better, you wouldn't have done the bad thing, because you would have been in that space to practice what you know, right? So Jupiter in Cancer is the universe repeating to you, you're allowed to feel this until you actually do. You're allowed to cry. It's not your fault. We're all allowed to make mistakes and get forgiveness, self-forgiveness, especially for those mistakes, right? So in terms of the planetary conversations, what each aspect is adding to, Jupiter in Cancer, right? So we've got Venus making a conjunction to Jupiter, applying. So Venus is in Gemini, walking towards Jupiter. Love is approaching, growth and expansion. And this conjunction is saying your relationships are ready to grow, but Venus is still in Gemini and it's still in the thinking realm, the space of intellectual thought, whilst Jupiter has just entered the feeling territory and path, right? So the Sabian symbol for Venus at 23rd degree of Gemini, three fledglings, birds in the nest high in the tree. It's telling us that new things are being born in our relationship world, but they're still vulnerable, still high up, still need protection before they can fly, So it's reminding us about being gentle with ourselves, having the right self-care as we are open up to the loving of Jupiter in Cancer. We've got Mars making a quintile to Jupiter. So this is inspired action energy, and the 72 degree aspects, brings genius, triggers us to be creative. So Mars in Aries is courage at its purest, right? And this is where Mars is right now. And combined with Jupiter exalted at its best in Jupiter, right? This is creative fire meeting emotional depth. And the Sabian symbol for Mars at the 17th degree of Aries is two prime spinsters, sitting together in silence, so they're prim and proper and in their prime. And it's fascinating because it's reminding us of silence as power. resistance as strength. Not all action is loud, you know. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is sit with what's uncomfortable without reacting, you know, and this is what this aspect is wanting us to do. And these aspects will flavour the whole time Jupiter is in Cancer, right, affecting how we deal with this energy, right? And then we've got Jupiter making a square to Chiron at 5 degrees applying. So this is the wound activation aspect, right? And our ability to grow will bump into our oldest pain, so we may be slowed down by our pain and suffering, and growth and wounding is in tension right now, you know. Chiron's Sabian symbol, a square lightly lighted on one side, shows exactly what's happening. It's half illuminated, half in its shadow still, so we can see the wound clearly now. The other side is dark. Jupiter is bringing the light, but the square means it's not comfortable, it's confrontational. So this aspect says you cannot grow without healing, and you cannot heal without feeling the thing you've been avoiding, right? So together, these aspects, the conjunction between Venus and Jupiter, is like two people merging, mixing into one conversation. Love and expansion and growth becoming inseparable, separate from inseparate, can't be separated from each other. There you go. And as Venus moves from Gemini towards Cancer, she'll eventually join Jupiter in Cancer in the water realm, deepening the emotional relationship growth from intellectual to the emotional. And the quincunx between Mars and Jupiter, the subtler energy but more potent than the rest, because quintiles are creative aspects. They don't force action like squares or ease it like trines. They trigger the kind of insight that comes sideways, so, you know, when you're not looking. So Mars in Aries, quintile Jupiter in Cancer is warrior energy meeting nurturing wisdom, giving us the ability, the skills to fight for something in a tender way, in a gentle way, rather than against something in a threatening, impulsive way, right? Even though Mars is in Aries, but Jupiter in Cancer is chilling the energy out. And the square between Jupiter and Chiron is the aspect that stops this transit from being all love and light. And we don't do love and light here, remember? Squares demand action. Jupiter square Chiron in Aries says your growth will be more painful in the places where you're already wounded, but, you know, take some time out and be gentle with yourself, and it'll be worth it in the end once you confront what needs confronting, you know, wherever you've learned that emotional needs were weaknesses, that vulnerability was dangerous, that asking for care was burdensome, these beliefs are going to be challenged directly by Jupiter in Cancer. And the combination of all these three aspects create a pattern of love. You know, Venus bringing us creative courage, and Mars too. And, you know, it's reminding us that we must confront old wounds first. We can't skip the Chiron square, you know, to get the Venus conjunction. We have to go through the pain, the dealing with the shadow, and understanding our wounds and learning to manage them to get to the Venus energy, right? Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the transiting aspects, giving you a bit more of the bigger picture. So there's two T-squares that are activated when Jupiter enters Cancer, creating pressure that demands action, right? So we've got the first T-square between the Moon in Sagittarius opposing Mercury in Gemini that are both squaring Neptune in Pisces. So this is a mutable energy T-square, right? Bringing tension between what we feel, the Moon, what we think, Mercury, and what we imagine or idealize and fantasize about Neptune. It's low intensity but persistent, like background noise, right? So we can kind of run into fantasy and overthink right now and overfill. So we need to watch out for that. The second T-square, Saturn in Pisces opposing Venus in Gemini, both squaring the midheaven in Virgo at 23% intensity. So this T-square So this T-square is more impactful. Our career expectations are caught between duty and letting go, Saturn in Pisces, and love and logic, Venus in Gemini. Something we'll have to give, and in the work, love, duty triangle. So we'll have to make a choice which one we'll focus on, or which two we'll focus on, work, love or duty, The T-square creates a triangle of tension, where two planets oppose each other and the third one squares both, becoming the pressure point where the energy must be released. The T-square between Neptune, Mercury and the Moon, is when our feelings and our thoughts disagree, and the temptation is to dissolve into fantasy, substances, drugs and alcohol, toxicity or spiritual bypassing. The healthy resolution, however, is to let our imagination serve our emotional truth rather than replace it, And then we've got the T-square between the midheaven in Virgo and Saturn and Venus, right? So Saturn says duty, sacrifice, dissolution, letting go of the ego. Venus says connection, pleasure, intellectual stimulation. And the midheaven in Virgo demands practical resolution, asking us what does, service actually look like when you're torn between obligation and desire. So we have to, try and meet the needs of, how we serve, how we, put our ego forward, because we don't need to let go of the ego. We just need to know how to channel that energy in a way that serves us and others, right? And when to meet our obligations, which is always really, but then getting clear on what are our actual responsibilities, other people's feelings beyond, being aware of their boundaries and respecting them, but we can't do their emotional work for them, right? So both T-squares are relatively low intensity, 12 and 23%, which means they don't bring like a crisis level. There are persistent sort of itching tension that colours the Jupiter ingress, sign change into Cancer. So think of them as weather conditions that are gonna stay with us all the time. Jupiter's in Cancer, right? So we just need to pay attention to the way that we may overindulge in substances, get lost in fantasy, and use spiritual bypassing to transcend, go beyond our, avoid working with our emotional, psychological and spiritual traumas, right? Learning to use our ego in a healthy way, and try not to overthink as well. Now, in terms of the Sabian symbol, when a sign goes into when a planet that is goes into a new sign, typically it goes into the first degree, right? So it's Jupiter's going into the first degree of Cancer, which has the Sabian symbol, a sailor ready to put up a new flag to replace the old one. So yeah, this symbol, puts our attention to a sailor on a ship. They've been sailing under one flag, one identity, one allegiance, one set of beliefs about who they are and where they belong, and now they're standing on deck with a new flag in their hands, ready to run it up the mast. The old one hasn't been torn down yet, the new one hasn't been raised yet, they're in between, and this is the image Jupiter enters Cancer in, right? So the core meaning of this symbol is, fundamentally about our conscious identity changes, right? Not the kind that happens to you, but the kind you choose, right? Thinking about what in your personality, expression and life you need to change. The sailor isn't being shipwrecked or losing their flag in a storm. They're deliberately, intentionally replacing one allegiance with another. This is about choosing who you belong to, what you stand for, and which flag you fly, knowing that the old one served its purpose but no longer represents where you're heading. And at the first degree of Cancer, this is the very first degree of the emotional realm. It's saying, at the threshold of feeling, you get to choose what emotional allegiance you carry forward. Your family's flag, your culture's flag, your trauma's flag, or something new. Something that actually represents the person you've become through the work you have done. And from a psychological lens, the sailor represents the ego at a conscious choice point. The old flag is the inherited identity, the family role, the survival strategy, the mask you wore to belong. And the new flag is the individuated self, who you are actually, who you are when you start performing who you were taught to be. And Jung called this the individuation process, the lifelong work of becoming who you actually are, rather than who you have been conditioned to be, what your conditioning, your experiences in childhood and with adult rejection, heartbreak, grief and all of that have made you. And that doesn't mean ignoring grief and thinking you have to become a whole different person, but to make sure that you are who you want to be, rather than just a product of every experience that happened to you in a negative way. It's about bringing balance. So at the first degree of Cancer, this individuation process will happen through our emotions, as I said, not through thinking about our feelings, but through allowing our emotional truth to reshape our identity. And Jupiter exalted at this degree increases the choice, amplifies it. This isn't a quiet, private flag change. This is a declaration. Jupiter says, make it public. Let people see the new flag. The expansion growth here isn't just eternal, it's the courage to let your emotions evolve and your emotional evolution be visible. And with Pluto retrograde in Capricorn, the old flag, the one built on power, control, public image, status, wealth, keeping up with the lights and social media, institutional belonging and conforming, is being questioned from the inside. The new flag has to be authentic in a way the old one wasn't, right? So in terms of healing and growth and karmic patterns and lessons, beyond the psychological layer, this transit activates deeper karmic patterns, the soul lessons you came here to learn, the essential generational themes you're here to heal, and the evolutionary growth direction your spirit is pulling you towards. So the soul work of Jupiter in Cancer, and this transit is about, healing the mother wound, the feminine energy wound, not necessarily your relationship with your actual mother, though it might include it, but the deeper wound around nurturing, safety and belonging and loving yourself, forgiving yourself and allowing yourself to be emotional. Some of you, as I said, may have learned that love came with conditions, and for a lot of us it did. Some of you have learned that being cared for meant being controlled. Some of you never learned what safe attachment actually feels like, because no one in your family knew either. They were too busy surviving their own unhealed patterns. So Jupiter exalted in Cancer is offering something rare, the capacity to expand, grow your understanding of what care actually is, not the performance of care, not the sacrificing yourself, losing yourself in service, giving until you're empty, the martyrdom of care, but the real thing, the kind that nourishes you without suffocating you and controlling you, that protects you without imprisoning you, that gives without losing itself. And Parna Vusu Sakra as the teaching of, the renewal, the storm, the letting go as the cleanser. A deity doesn't destroy for the sake of destruction. A deity destroys what's stagnant so new life can move again and be renewed. Your ancestral patterns around emotional safety, some of them need a storm. Some of them need to be cried out, raised out, felt out, not managed, not meditated away, not spiritually bypassed into oblivion. And the karmic invitation is clear. Feel what your ancestors couldn't feel. Process what they passed down unprocessed. Break the cycle, not by being strong, but by being honest about what hurts, Like that moment in Succession when Kendall finally stops performing, stops trying to be what Logan needed, stops trying to earn love that was never available, and just sits in the raw reality of who his father actually was. That's this transit, getting real about what people are capable of giving you. The performance of family loyalty giving way, to actual emotional truth, being real about people's ability to give you what it is you're seeking, right? And acting accordingly. And this is why I say it's very important that we learn to have a one-on-one relationship with ourselves that we put first, because, life be lifing, and sometimes people have got commitments, jobs, and baggage, and they can't give you what you need. And if we keep seeking it in places that can't give it us, then we're just going to keep on being unhappy, right? So now I'm just going to talk about relationships, how Jupiter going in Cancer affects those in more detail, right? So in terms of committed partnerships and marriage, Jupiter in Cancer is great for deepening committed relationships. So if your partnership has been operating on autopilot, functional but emotionally flat, this transit cracks it open. The expansion growth happens through vulnerability, through actually telling your partner what you need instead of hoping they guess. What's for the side of Jupiter in Cancer? It can make us grow neediness as well as it expands our nurturing. So if you're smothering your partner or they're smothering you, that's not love, that's the wound performing as care and codependency. So make sure you are aware of the difference and make sure that you are respecting each other's boundaries. So in terms of, passionate and newer connections, Venus conjunct Jupiter says love is possible and it will be emotionally deep. That I actually see you kind of love rather than the surface level kind. But Venus in Gemini, the fledglings, the birds are still in the nest, they're not out of it yet. So new connections need protection and patience before they can fly and nurture. So just be patient in new relationships, right? In terms of family dynamics, this is a big one. Jupiter in Cancer, as I said, puts family dynamics under a magnifying glass, and Pluto retrograde as X-ray vision. Old rules and roles will be challenged. The family scapegoat might stop accepting the role. The family peacemaker might finally get angry, and the one who left might come back, and the conversation everyone's been avoiding might finally happen. And our friendships and community, our definition of chosen family grows. Jupiter in Cancer helps you recognize which friendships actually nurture you and which drain you, and community involvement increases, especially in causes related to care, children, housing or food security. In terms of casual connections and dating, they can take on emotional depth as well. If you're dating, you'll find yourself wanting substance over stimulation. The small talk feels unbearable. You want to know who someone actually is, but of course this may go outside of what the other people or person in the relationship hookup connection wants, to make sure you respect their boundaries too. And it may mean that you end hooking up because they can't give you what you need right now, or their hookup relationship can deepen. So for those who are self-partnered or single, this transit asks you to become the nurturing presence you've been seeking from others. Jupiter in Cancer says the safety you crave, build it inside yourself first, not because you don't deserve it from others, but because you'll recognize it in others only when you recognize it in yourself, right? So in terms of our life development, growth across our worlds, right? So in our career and our purpose, the shift from thinking Gemini energy, right, to feeling Cancer energy means, as I said, your career needs may make a change, and you may want your career to make emotional sense, not just logical sense right now. Entrepreneurs, creatives and healers, this is your transit. So if your work involves caring for people, feeding people, housing people or helping people feel safe, Jupiter in Cancer is amplifying your impact and its energy. So this is really good for all types of healing, entrepreneurial work. In terms of education and learning can become more lifting, embodied. You're not collecting information anymore, you're digesting it, feeling it, integrating it into your actual life. Courses in psychology, bodywork and sensual healing, cooking or midwifery are favoured. Renovations and relocations and creating sacred domestic spaces, as I said earlier, can all expand right now. But remember, a bigger house doesn't mean a safer heart. The inner renovation matters, looking after your inner world. It matters more than looking after the outer one right now. So paying attention, as I said, to your emotional, psychological and spiritual needs and wounds and nurturing them. So Cancer rules the stomach, breast and chest cavity, as I said, and it activates the sixth Vib area because of the Sabian degree, the first degree of Cancer. So pay attention to digestive health, chest tightness and anything you're swallowing emotionally that your body is holding. Comfort eating may increase, as I said. Notice when you're nourishing or numbing yourself. In terms of the holistic toolkit, what to actually do. Write a letter to the version of yourself who first learned that feelings were not safe. Tell them what you know now, that they are safe for you, or you're going to make them safe for you to explore. In terms of body practices, water-based healing, baths with intentions, showers, swimming, sitting by rivers or the ocean. Cancer is water energy, and Jupiter grows what you immerse yourself in, so let the water hold you. In terms of ancestral work, create a small altar for your maternal line, the feminine energy. You don't need to forgive anyone, you just need to acknowledge the pattern exists and say it changes with me. In terms of practical actions for you to take one concrete step towards housing security, financial foundations, as I said earlier, looking after your savings, budgeting, trying not to emotionally overspend. Make your physical space feel like home, not thinking about it but actually doing it right. Some of you may consider therapy, specifically around family patterns, attachment styles, or the mother wound. This is the transit that says now is the time, because Jupiter, as I said many times, has resulted in Cancer, so this supports deep emotional work better than any transit, right? So now I'm just going to give you some more inner work questions to help you. So sit with these, don't answer them quickly, let them work with you over the 5 months Jupiter's in Cancer. Take your time to answer them. So what does home mean to you, and when did you first learn that definition? If you start performing your family role tomorrow, who would you actually be? What are you protecting that no longer needs protecting, right? Where in your life have you confused control with care? What would change if you believed you were allowed to need people? So, Pluto, is retrograde, and it went retrograde just about 25 days before Jupiter enters Cancer on the 6th of May 2026. And as I said, this isn't just background noise, this is the baseline, right? Pluto retrograde turns the transformation inward, right? Everything Pluto has been doing externally, dismantling power structures, exposing institutional corruption, forcing collective growth and evolution, now goes internal. The question changes from what's wrong with the system to what's wrong with my relationship to power. In the 10th house, this hits career, public image and authority directly. Your professional identity is being changed, composted from the inside out. The version of you that climbed the ladder, that performed competence, that needed external validation to feel powerful. Pluto retrograde is quietly asking whether that version is still alive or whether you've been propping up a corpse. Sometimes we can stop ourselves from growing. And with Jupiter in Cancer, on top of this energy of Pluto, right, Jupiter says expand and grow through emotion, through family, through vulnerability, through self-care. Pluto retrograde says, but first let's destroy the fake version of power and the fake version of yourself you've been performing. This combination creates a profound, deep tension between who you've been professionally and who you're becoming, right? Some of you will change careers, some of you will realise that authority that you've chased was a substitute for the safety that you never had as a child, right? Some of you will discover that real power, the kind that doesn't need to dominate, comes from the same place Cancer lives, emotional honesty, right? Think of it like The Sopranos. If you've never watched it, it's a great little drama series, about 5 seasons. And Tony goes to therapy. He's a mobster, right? Realising that the panic attacks are not weaknesses, they're his body finally breaking through the performance of invincibility. And Pluto retrograde is the panic attack, right? Jupiter in Cancer says, we take the therapy, that follows acknowledging that, our body's trying to tell us something. It's telling us practically not to fight the internal dismantling, letting go of the old you. Let Pluto do its retrograde work. The power structures that were hollow anyway are not you. And what Jupiter in Cancer builds in their place will be real, rooted in emotional truth rather than ego construction, and just putting on an act for everybody else and people pleasing and self-neglect and all of that. And Pluto is in retrograde until October the 16th. So The entire first phase of Jupiter in Cancer is coloured by this internal power, reckoning, judgment. By the time Pluto goes direct, you'll have a clearer understanding of what authority actually means to you, and it won't look like how it used to, right? So as I said, Jupiter doesn't stay direct forever in Cancer. On the December the 13th, 2026, it goes retrograde in Leo in the 5th house, because it moves into Leo. It's going to move into Leo in October. I think I've already told you guys, but it's going to move into Leo on the 31st of October, and then it goes retrograde in Leo on the 13th, and then it goes direct out of retrograde when it's in the 22nd degree of Cancer on April the 13th, 2027. So what does this mean for you? Well, Jupiter enters the shadow retrograde, pre-retrograde zone on the 17th of September, and from this point you are in pre-retrograde territory, pathway, right? And the expansion growth that Jupiter has been building since entering Cancer on the 1st of June, so 3 months by then, starts to slow, and the growth doesn't stop, but it turns more inward. And by December, when Jupiter actually goes retrograde at the 2nd degree of Leo, the review process begins, right? Everything you've expanded, grown, your emotional world, your family dynamics, your sense of home and belonging gets reviewed when Jupiter's retrograde in Leo. Not destroyed, but reviewed. There's a difference. The retrograde asks, was the growth real? Did you expand growth from genuine emotional need or from fear? Did you build bigger because you needed more, or because you were afraid of not having, enough? So, Jupiter goes retrograde once a year, so it's not crisis energy, it's quality control. Think of it like the universe asking you to check the foundations, your daily habits, that you've built in the year so far, especially when it comes to the Jupiter growth energy, right? And it's asking you to reinforce back up, make more habits that are healthy, and to release the ones that are not healthy, right? So Jupiter, goes into the pre-shadow phase on the 17th of September, as I said, enters retrograde on the 13th, goes direct again on the 13th of April 2027, and leaves the shadow section of retrograde on the 11th of July 2027. So use the direct phase June to December 2026 to build, expand and grow, and use the retrograde phase December 26 to April 2027 to review, refine and change the habits and, root down deeper into what you need to feel secure emotionally. Both of these phases are necessary. Both phases are productive. The retrograde, isn't punishment, it's integration. So the key takeaways that I want you guys to take away about Jupiter going into Cancer, it isn't about becoming more emotional, it's about becoming more honest about the emotions you have. And Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, is the most emotionally expansive transit of Jupiter, right? And combined with Pluto retrograde, it's asking you to dismantle, to let go, change the performance of strength and build something real in its place, real strength, by incorporating, acknowledging your emotions. The same brilliant symbol of the sailor putting up the flag, is playing. Now you're the sailor with the new flag, the old allegiance, the family roles that no longer fit, to definitions of safety that keeps you small, to emotional patterns inherited from people who were doing their best with what they had. The flag has served its purpose. The new flag, that's the one that represents who you are now, who you actually are becoming, not who you were raised to be, not who and what your trauma made you, not who your family needed you to be, but you, the real you, hoist the flag, put the flag up, right? Let people see it. Jupiter in Cancer says this is the year you come home to yourself, and, mate, that's the only homecoming that matters, your self-love, approval, and allowing yourself to get back into your center, right? And to love on yourself in the way that needs, in the way that, balances you and in the ways that you need. So yeah, I'm Imani, your holistic, astrological, karmic life coach, and this has been all things Jupiter in Cancer. Take care and see you next time.